I'm County Commissioner Pat Kemp. Good morning. I'm Chair of the HART Board of Directors, and we'll ask for everyone to silence their devices for this meeting. Welcome to the December 9th, 2022 regular Board of Directors meeting, now called to order. The meeting is hybrid with board members physically present at the HART Administrative Office, and I assume we're going to have some present virtually. Please look at the screens of your devices. There's an image of the flag, and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. I know I was okay. And I thought it was December 5th, but I was reading the script that was written and suddenly doubted myself. So it's December 5th, 2022 meeting. And with that, we will do a roll call. Staff, could we please have a roll call?
Director Castor. Here. Director Frazier.
Here.
Director Hudson.
Here.
Director Johnson.
Here.
Chair Kemp.
Here.
Director Knight.
Here.
Director Myers. Director Owen. Here. Director Schisler.
Here.
Director Vieira. Director Williams.
Here.
Director Wolstel.
Here.
You do have a quorum, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And with that, we are going to recognize an outgoing board member. Ms. LeGrand, you are recognized for the recognition of Commissioner Mariella Smith.
Thank you. We'd like to take a moment right now to recognize Commissioner Smith. For me, this is a special commissioner. She was actually the chair when I got hired. Worked very closely with her for the first year, and she has really served HART in a stellar way, advocating for us and making sure that the community knew the value that HART could bring. So we just wanted to take this moment to thank her for all of her support for the organization, even beyond the time I was here, and just thank her. I know we have a gift for her, and we sent it to her. It's a crystal HART bus. If you were here last week, we gave one also to Commissioner Overman. So thank you for the opportunity.
And I don't know if any other board members have any comments they'd like to make at this time. I'd just like to really thank Commissioner Smith for her service to HART. She's been a dedicated 4-year HART board member and took over the chair in a really very difficult time. And I know that she spent a lot of time trying to work on the issues here at HART and make our way through them. So thank you so much, Commissioner Smith. Is Commissioner Smith online?
We invited her, but I did not see her join.
Okay. With that, I was going to ask if she wanted to say anything, but seeing no other comments at this time, we will officially welcome our new board members. First board member I'd like to welcome is Commissioner Michael Owen, who was appointed to the HART Board on November 22nd. He is Commissioner for District 4 in Brandon, where he's raised. He's hometown, actually, it says business leader. I guess I would say lawyer is my first thought, but committed to public safety, and we welcome you to the HART Board. So Director Owen, do you have any comments?
Yes, I do. It's when you say lawyer, gosh, it makes everyone cringe. But
I didn't mean to do that.
But I'm a small business lawyer. I'm from the Brandon area. District 4 is my home. I'm in love with my community. It's an honor to serve here with so many folks that are champions for Hillsborough County, and I just look forward to working with you all and to make HART the best transportation service in the state of Florida. So thank you.
Thank you. And the final board member I'd like to welcome here is Commissioner Joshua Wastel, who was appointed to the HART Board on November 22nd as well. He is a commissioner for District 7 countywide. He's an entrepreneur, decorated veteran, and passionate advocate for disadvantaged children. And we welcome you to the HART Board. Director Wastel, do you have any comments?
Thank you, Chair. I'm just happy to help improve this organization for the people that desperately need it to be improved. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. With that, we will move to public comment. I don't think I have, I know some of the public comments written were sent to me, but I do not have a list of those signed up for public comment at this time.
I do have the list, Madam Chair. The first one is a comment.
Before you start, I'll just
Oh,
let people
apologize.
know, I know that they're included in the packets of rules, but I'd like to let everyone know that there's a limit of 3 minutes. So at 3 minutes, you'll be cut off there. So with that, we can go on.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In the order of which the comments were received, and before I read the first written comment, I did want to note for the record that there were 3 email declarations in support of Ms. Segran's staying on as CEO. And then moving on, the first written comment was received via email, and the comment reads, Ms. Segran has been doing a great job considering the mismanagement and dysfunction she acquired coming into HART as the CEO. HART finally has a CEO who has been willing to step up and make the hard decision that most at HART are not used to and is not ready for, but yet want change. HART needs someone who can stand firm on the decision that will, in long run, be best for the company, employees, and the public. And I believe Ms. Segran is the person who can accomplish the goal if given the chance to continue to move HART forward in a new direction. The old way definitely has not worked. Regarding the latest firings of directors, managers, etc., some definitely should have been let go before the CEO was hired on. Some have abused their powers far too long and disrespected and mistreated employees for years, violated the union contract over and over again, and retaliated against union employees. This is what has created a hostile work environment over the years, way before Ms. Segran became CEO. Recognizing the CEO for making much needed overdue changes at HART, starting with the customer service department by immediately walking in and seeing the working conditions at the MTC location and allowing the employees to work from home during COVID-19 pandemic and after. This is something that then Director of Customer Service, Gregory Bracken, and Manager Kemley Green said couldn't be done and treated the employees as if they were thieves when it came to the equipment that would be needed to be taken home. Mr. Grant, within 24 hours of seeing the less than 6 feet distance that the department was working under, as well as flying insects and dust everywhere, despite how great of a job the HART Maintenance Department was doing to keep the area sanitized and clean, employees getting sick every time they came into the call center to work. That department is grateful to Ms. Legrand for making the bold decision, and that department is now more productive. Fewer employees are out sick because of her actions, a better work-life balance, and the employees are happier to come to work. Of course, the management didn't like it because they saw it as someone overruling them, but Ms. Legrand made the decision that was in the best interest of HART, the employees, and the public. If the customer service call center can't work in a clean, safe environment, how can they provide excellent customer service to HART patrons? Again, management missed the mark, not the CEO. Also, the restrooms were shut down in the public, and some management were in opposition because of the outcry from the public, but even some board members because of the tough calls to their office. But Ms. Legrand did what a person in leadership should have done and saw the long-term benefit of not reopening just to suffice the immediate, and now the restrooms are safer. Isn't that what you brought her in here to do, board members? Changes what HART.
Excuse me. Someone has their microphone on and we're hearing I don't know what, but please, whoever you are, please turn that microphone off. Hopefully that will do it.
Change is what HART needs, and this is what Ms. Legrand has brought to the table. Most do not like change, but it is needed no matter who it's coming from. You cannot satisfy every employee in the options and the opinions of the writer/public. Every employee is not in opposition to Ms. Legrand as CEO. I do not think she needs to resign or be terminated or be placed on suspension. Let her do her job. This is what she's qualified to do and what the board hired her to do. The board, if you want to crucify Ms. Legrand without any evidence because you want it to look like you're doing something to the public, is it not the right thing to do to conduct the welcome investigation and let the evidence speak before deciding to ask her to resign, terminate her, or put her on suspension. Would you not want the same thing? Thank you for your time.
And before we go on, I'd just like to recognize that, put into the record that Commissioner Myers has notified us that she would arrive late, for the record. And
Thank
then
you,
you
Chair.
can continue.
The second comment that was received via email. It says, "Good morning, HART Executive Board of Directors. My name is, to Commissioner Pat Kemp, Chair, to Ms. LeGrand, HART CEO. My name is Letitia Jones, and HART Plus operator for 10 years and past president of ATU Local 1593. I was the union president at the time when Ms. LeGrand was hired. I was there when she went through the interviewing process. Ms. LeGrand presented a presentation running an effective transportation system where you have to hold employees accountable for what they are hired to do. Ms. LeGrand was hired during a challenging time for our country. As a union president, Ms. LeGrand met with me and the Local 1593 leadership team, and also through the phone was introduced to the Local 1593 International Vice President, Mr. Curtis Howard. She has addressed any concerns the local has. Because of non-effectiveness leadership at HART, Ms. LeGrand inherited a shipload of problems and underfunded agency, employee relations problems, an aging fleet, and a maintenance shop where it rains, it floods the main shop, and attendance problems. When you hire a management team and they are not moving the agency forward, then change has to take place. When balancing the budget, change has to take place. I stand with Ms. LeGrand, her stellar leadership, her transparency, her tenacity to move HART forward. Ms. LeGrand had to make some challenging decisions, disfavored and executive decisions to balance the budget. If this executive board of directors took a closer look at administration salaries, you would have made the changes. You had a manager supervising 7 employees making $100,000. What a waste of tax dollars. I'm not going into the issue with double dipping. I believe we only know what we know. We can't read or see beyond what someone tells us. Ms. LeGrand, may you continue to lead with the courage, integrity, and character you've demonstrated since day one of your employment. Respectfully, Letitia Jones, HART Plus operator. The third comment or registration for comment was a Robert Simons, and he indicated that he would be in person.
Is Mr. Simons here?
Good morning.
I'm Board Chair, Board, Ms. LeGrand. My name is Robert Simmons. I'm a retired general counsel for a large insurance company. And as a general counsel for a large insurance company, I've been through a lot of the changes that Ms. LeGrand's facing. It's not a tough, it is a tough position to make tough decisions. A lot of times you're not going to be liked for the decisions you make. But if your overall goal is for the preservation of the organization, then I say employees, union, let her do her job. Okay, at the end of that job, whatever her contract period is, I don't know the particulars behind that, then that's the time to evaluate her. But to send a gladiator into a Roman amphitheater and give the thumbs down before she went for a fight is the wrong thing to do. And so I suggest to you that time will tell you indeed whether she's a good CEO or not. But I don't think right now is the right time. I think that she's doing the right things that she needs to do for the organization, for this city. And I see, as a resident, I don't take the buses, but I do see that the buses are running, they're clean, that people are happy with the service. That must speak something about the leadership that she's doing. I've lived in several major cities where I see buses on the side of the road. People have to call for backup buses to come. I don't see that in Tampa. So to me, as not an insider inside the organization, but an outsider looking in, something must be working here. So I suggest to you that give her time. I've seen her presentations. She seems collected, calm, through some very stormy waters. That's a good indication of a CEO that's pretty confident of where she's taking her organization. I suggest to you that if you allow her to do her job and that you support her, including the union, what a great success story to say that the union, the CEO, the board came together and turned this organization around. Everybody shares in the successes. Everybody shares in the failures. I suggest to you that the success is the better way to go. So give her time. I have every bit of confidence that she will do what she's supposed to do here. But if she's not doing what she's supposed to do, there should be objective standards by which the public can view her performance against those standards, and they raise the decision whether she's meeting the job or not in conjunction with the board. I thank you for your time, and the best of luck to all of you.
Thank you.
The fourth person is Mr. James Jeffries, and I believe he is in the audience.
I'm sorry? You're in, okay. Mr. Jeffries.
Good morning. My name is James Jeffries. I'm a master technician working at HART and Facilities Department. First, let me say that before HART, I worked for the Chicago Transit Authority, the third largest transit agency in the nation. Although I joined HART a little more than 2 years ago, I have a lot of experience working in an environment like HART. So what I have to say is based on experience in a similar workplace. Like HART, I've seen CEOs come and go because it's not an easy job. And when I first met Ms. LeGrand, I told her good luck because I knew what she was up against considering the history of high turnover and leadership at HART. Since joining HART, I've worked closely with and around Ms. LeGrand on small and large projects. She was fully engaged and very clear in her goals and expectations. At the same time, I felt she was always treated me and my coworkers with dignity and respect. I've also worked near and around her and her office staff and noticed the same professional behavior and demeanor with other HART employees. Organizational change is hard and difficult decisions have to be made, especially when there's budgetary constraints. But when you ask a leader of an organization to fix an organization, that you have to accept everything will not go smoothly and mistakes will happen. When you hired Ms. LeGrand, you handed her the challenge of fixing a flat tire when the car is still moving. I think that she's done a good job because she was allowed to ratify the ATU contract, which had been stalemated for 3 years, which put money in their pockets. And she negotiated a subsequent 3-year contract, which is almost unheard of in this industry. I know this board is under a lot of pressure to make changes. I'll close by saying that the board has a responsibility to HART and the community to perform their duties in a fair and equitable manner. You have voted on and approved a measure that puts in motion an independent investigation. Waiting for the outcome of the investigation is the greatest demonstration that you are handling the matter in an equitable manner. Any premature action regarding Ms. LeGrand before reviewing the outcome of the independent investigation goes against the basic laws of justice, which assume innocence until proven guilty. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Next, there was a comment received via email. Good morning, I'm sending this email to the board, and I would like to stay anonymous due to retaliation, and I'm sending this email in support of Mrs. LeGrand. I've been with HART Transit Authority for several years, and I've seen CEOs come and go, and I appreciate Mrs. LeGrand as our CEO. I appreciate her directness. I appreciate her trying to move this company forward. I appreciate her holding employees accountable. For many, many years, us drivers have been invisible. She has informed us that our voice counts and matters. Right now, I'm using my voice. I do not stand with Ishmael Rivera asking for Mrs. LeGrand's resignation. He is not speaking for the majority. He's speaking for himself. Next was another comment received via email. Dear members of the HART Board, after hearing about the investigation into the allegations against the current CEO, Ms. Adelie LeGrand, I felt compelled to write to you. I was a HART employee for nearly 4 years before resigning due to the hostile working conditions under both Ms. LeGrand and Ms. Terry Wright. I was one of the first few employees to leave under their leadership, but I could foresee that their leadership style would eventually lead to more resignations and terminations. Having worked directly under both Ms. LeGrand and Ms. Wright, I can attest to the behaviors and treatment described in the allegations made by others. I can also attest to the close relationship that Ms. LeGrand and Ms. Wright had before Mrs. Wright's employment at HART and during the rest of my tenure. I believe the current leadership style isn't conducive to a good working environment, nor acting as a good steward to the community. Had other HART employees acted in this manner towards other employees, HART customers, or even towards you, the board, we would have been quickly reprimanded or terminated. Many of us who voluntarily left did so without having another job lined up. We would rather risk joblessness or homelessness rather than work in that toxic environment, especially during the uncertainty of the pandemic. I thoroughly enjoyed my job at HART before Ms. LeGrand's arrival and took pride in my work, but could not continue to work there with the daily mistreatment. I too was subjected to verbal abuse she bestowed to other employees. I was told not provide assistance to the chiefs and directors, but to keep a record of missed suspenses and tasks. She wanted a document trail to use against them when needed. I was told not to speak to certain coworkers and employees and sever long-term working relationships in a show of loyalty to Ms. LeGrand. I felt belittled, humiliated, and emotionally abused by Ms. LeGrand and Ms. Wright. Towards the end of my employment, I was ostracized and was told not to speak to Ms. LeGrand or step foot inside her office. Upon my resignation, I heard the false reasons they gave fellow employees about the reason for my departure. In an attempt to refute those allegations and restore my honor and credibility, I requested evidence substantiating my claims via public records request. That request was never resolved due to the excessive fees I would have unfairly incurred. With respect to your time, I won't go into future details, but welcome any questions by investigators. I ask the board to think about the many loyal and dutiful employees who remain faithful to HART and consider how they may feel working in this environment and the impact it could have on their mental and physical health, as well as the impact or dangers it could impose on the citizens in our community. Thank you for your time. Following that comment, we have an in-person from a Mr. Stanley Gray.
Good morning, Madam Chair and board members. I come to you today in support of Ms. LeGrand, but I need to tell you a little bit about my background. I was a human resource professional for many years in corporations. My expertise was turnarounds, startups, and also in labor. I can honestly tell you that to change an organization is a very painful thing. I'm speaking to you not only personally, but also professionally with the Urban League of Hillsborough County. Our mission is to assist with the attainment of economic equity to the African American minority communities. One of the things that we really rely heavily on is collaboration and hand-up activities. Ms. LeGrand is one of the few heads of organizations in this county who is actually committed summer jobs for individuals who need them. That is a way to attain economic equity. The other thing I would like to say is that I know that we're all swayed by public opinion. And I ask all of you board members to be very vigilant in how you take in information. I saw something on TV the other day that was very alarming to me. You had someone who was representing the workforce of this organization, and they're a union member. As we know, union contracts go both ways, okay? My first question when I saw this person making all these allegations, my first question was, have you filed a grievance? And if you have filed a grievance, at what level is that grievance? And if that grievance has not been settled at the final grievance, when is the arbitration set? I could speak longer, but I'm asking you all to be very objective with your assessments. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Following Mr. Gray was a comment received via email. I'm writing as a former employee of what was once a very successful and well-run transit system known as HART. In the past 6 years, this agency went from being the APTA Outstanding Mid-Size Agency of the Year to being the joke that many judge it to be today. We cared about our riding public, we cared about our operators and supervisors, we cared about our maintenance technicians and staff, and we cared about our non-bargaining staff. That doesn't happen now and hasn't happened in a very long time. We had a wellness program that encouraged staff to think about their health and well-being while supporting the community by participating in events throughout Hillsborough County. We had other events that brought employees together without the boundaries of job titles. That changed when Ben Limmer was terminated. From Carolyn House Stewart to the current CEO, the title means more than the camaraderie we once enjoyed. There was a feeling of family instead of the current us against them scenario happening now, even beyond management and union issues. On top of that, the ability of a less titled employee to make a suggestion or question a process has been completely removed, as is evidenced by the loss of more than 50 non-bargaining staff members. Yes, men and women are much more important to this agency, to the CEO, than anyone who has actual experience in running an efficient department, let alone an entire agency. If the board members were honest with themselves, they would admit that the current CEO was actually their third choice after two extremely qualified male candidates. But they cannot admit that they made a mistake by being politically correct and woke by hiring a black female for this position. If they could be honest and open, this investigation would have taken place before the loss of so many people who cared more about HART as a whole than about whether or not their boss liked them. Following that comment is Mr. Derek Pennywell.
Good morning, Madam Chair. Good morning, board members. My name is Derek Pennywell. I'm here today because I'm very disappointed in the way that Mrs. LeGrand has been treated for weeks. We are very excited that she is our CEO, and we are very excited that she is moving our organization forward in a positive manner. And there's 3 points that I would like to make about a scandal. And I actually thought that was funny because this is not Tyler Perry, the Oval. I don't believe there is no scandal. The second point is that there's 300 employees asking for her resignation. I just got an email just a few minutes ago that says, Derek, let them know when you speak that you're speaking for the majority of the drivers in the operators room. And I just want to say that it doesn't look good for our organization to go through CEO after CEO. I ask that we have Ms. LeGrand's back, and we just stay focused on having her back and letting her move us forward. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next is Valerie Conyers, if she is here in person. Following that was another comment received via email. Good morning, my name is Clayton Abell, and I am a current bus operator at HART and have been since 15 years, and I am not scared of any retaliation from anyone. It is time to speak up. I would like to have my statement read into the records because I live in Dade City and I have to drive a bus tonight until 1 a.m. I want to point something out to the board. The CEOs I have seen come and go are David Armijo, Philip Hale, Catherine Egan, Jeff Seward, Ben Limmer, and Carolyn Stewart. Nothing has been done to clean house. All people had to do is hostile work environment, and boom, another CEO was under investigation. I personally don't know Ms. LeGrand, but she earned my respect of trying to do what every CEO before her failed to do. She cleaned or started to clean house and terminated the people who give us operators day in and day out living HELL on this job. Every time a CEO is trying to clean house, all these overpaid employees do is run to the media and cry hostile work environment. That's when the media cares. When good operators get fired on a daily basis, no one says a word, especially not ATU. Do you see the Teamsters? No. Because all this does not concern their members. Now ATU jumps on the bandwagon, also crying foul play because first they want the publicity and second they want a CEO bowing down to them. ATU should be quiet because they can't sit in someone's office anymore and drink coffee all day instead of helping the bargaining employees. A union who is constantly under trusteeship for illegal crimes committed instead of getting their own act together and help all the bargaining employees. So we, the majority of operators, unfortunately don't know Ms. LeGrand because we was never good enough to be met. But we like her attempt to really clean the house, which is so much needed at HART. We have bus operators killed out there, and the media cared how long? A week or so until another headline came across. When is transit put first on everyone's list? We wished you would care about us operators the same way you care about those lousy employees who just got terminated. Proof to us that you can care about us the same way you care about those terminated employees. Thank you, Clayton Abell, bus operator. Following that is another statement received via email. Good morning, my name is Michaela Stuckey, and I am a former employee of HART. First and foremost, I would like to welcome the new board members. Perhaps they bring the change this board so desperately needs. I am proud to state I am an FDOT certified bus trainer, 3 years of school, and not a HART trainer. In 2018, I questioned the training department on their training procedures and practices, coming especially from the manager of training, now terminated, who does not have who does not even have a CDL, which is needed to operate a bus, but HART deemed her qualified to train incoming operators. I must have costed quite a steer because they turned around and accused me of sexual harassment, knowing from the get-go I was innocent. After the whole ordeal, I was even informed by an employee involved that they committed perjury just to get rid of me. I am trained in EEOC compliance and safety and security. I also hold several financial certificates and a degree in business amongst a PHR in human resource. All of this knowledge made it possible for me to question HART on several issues throughout the years, which was not appreciated. They called me an outcast and worse, which they needed to get rid of in any way possible. So they turned around and accused me of a crime, slaughtered my name. The union was of no help due to the fact I questioned them too and had them put into trusteeship, and I had filed charges against one of their high-ranking reps. The same union who frankly don't give a darn about any bargaining employee, but now stands here and supports non-union jobs. Hundreds of bargaining employees got terminated throughout the years. HART has the highest turnaround in the state of Florida. I was found innocent by an arbitrator, but lost my job. HART prevailed after all. This year in June, I reapplied as a bus operator. I did not miss HART, but I missed what I loved most, operating a bus. I got an email with an interview confirmation, and I appeared at the scheduled time. When Mr. Richard Campbell, don't know exactly which title he holds now, saw me, she ran to tell whomever. Next thing I knew, I was confronted by two individuals in front of everyone else. They did not even have the respect to introduce themselves. I was chased of the property like a stray dog, and I've never been more humiliated in my life. I completely shut down. I was Baker acted by my kids after 2 suicide attempts due to this ongoing humiliation and the rumors which were spread about my character by HART and ATU, and I'm not ashamed to admit it. I hope my therapist is proud of me. HART has been a toxic workplace since years, and no one ever investigates it on how rotten it is from the inside out. I follow the finances since 2010 and have records HART don't even have anymore about how the money was spread around and how money was maliciously distributed. I also have hundreds of files on the treatment of bargaining employees, to be continued by the next speaker. Following that was another email comment received. Good morning, my name is Denise Jackson, and I am a pro-transit advocate and a tax-paying citizen of Hillsborough County. I would like to take the next minutes to continue where Ms. Stuckey left off due to the 3-minute limit. The board is interested about Terry Wright having 2 jobs. What about the current CFO, also a friend of Ms. LeGrand, who lives and works from Ohio and taking care of the finances of HART from there? Personally, we love how she was green screened in at a meeting on 11/29. Her picture removed during the Pledge of Allegiance and then blended back in to make it look like she was present. The bad glitches in the YouTube video are proof to that. HART always thinks the people of Hillsborough County are dumb. Ms. Stuckey pointed out plenty of issues in private conversations with the current chair of this board, thinking she would help the little people by providing several documents to her. We could talk for hours on those subjects of how non-bargaining employees got their pay raises and literally were bought to stay silent. And the hardest working employees, the bargaining employees, were ignored because they were the easiest to replace. She was only interested in the little people when it was time to fish for votes. Personally, I don't know Ms. LeGrand, but I applaud her decision to clean house. She should have done it from the get-go because there are plenty of overpaid and underworked employees left. But now, when she recently fired 7 so-called high-ranking people and cleaned house, it is a big stink. She also hired the same number of new employees, so no savings there. She is the first CEO who has 2 executive admin assistants with a price tag of $160,000 a year. Smart move, though, to split it. I can't speak on her character. I leave that to others, but let's be honest, 65% of those employees who left in 2021 and 22 because they saw the grass is greener in form of money somewhere else. What about the little people who speaks up for all the lives ruined by HART and the so-called union, which is ran by an operator from Orlando and one from Austin, Texas? And frankly, they couldn't care less about this place because they don't live here and run this place like it's Cosa Nostra, which frankly it is. Nobody. There are so many stories, we could write a book. As we understand, the board is looking into discuss the terminated employees on Agenda 5B today. We welcome that in light of the fact that we are looking forward to mobilize all those former bargaining employees who got fired and driven to quit without just cause, and no one gave a darn about them and their ruined lives. The current union only pretends to care as long as you stuff your hard-earned money down their throats for their political agendas. At this point, HART needs a forensic investigation and be cleared of all those fancy job titles created for people who basically don't even care about transit, who are just there to terrorize the little people or play solitaire on their computers. Time to care about the people who make the city roll daily, 7 days a week. The current or next CEO needs a bucket and a mop and lots of pine sol to clean all the corrupt corners within HART, and the voters of Hillsborough County need to clean the board, which it looks like has already started. Once that is done, we can give the people of Hillsborough County what they need so desperately, a functioning public transit system. Thank you for your time. Following that, we had an in-person sign-up of Jamise Mills.
Is Ms. Mill here?
It does not appear so. Following that was Inez Godfrey. And following that person was Mr. Tom Rask, who is virtual.
Is Mr., okay.
Mr. Rask, could you please go ahead with your public comment? Mr. Rask, we cannot hear you.
Good morning. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Good morning. My name is Tom Rask, and I first note that the 3-minute limit doesn't seem to apply to comments read from emails into the record. I also spoke at the special board meeting last week. In that meeting, I said that a previous HART CEO, Ben Limmer, was fired in a special meeting that was not lawfully noticed. After I spoke, Chairman Kemp said the following, quote, "Just for the record, so there's no misunderstanding, the meeting with Mr. Limmer, when that came up, was a regularly scheduled board meeting with a whistleblower complaint 3 days before." Kemp's claim that, end quote, Kemp's claim that it was a regularly scheduled board meeting is simply false. Kemp's words, quote, "a whistleblower complaint 3 days before," end quote, proves that she's referring to the February 7, 2020 special board meeting. Don't take my word for it that it was in fact a special board meeting and one not noticed in accordance with your own board policies. Simply look at the meeting minutes from that February 2020 meeting, look at when it was noticed, and then examine your own board policy, paragraph 220.01. Kemp also received a letter of advice last year from the Florida Bar after I filed a bar complaint against her. If you're not an attorney yourself, ask an attorney friend, and they will tell you that no Florida attorney wishes to receive a letter of advice from the Florida Bar. The purpose of sharing this information with you is to shed light on why Kemp lied to you when she said I was incorrect about it being a special meeting. Kemp deflects, obfuscates, and even lies in order to diminish her critics. Based on the evidence before you, board members should therefore be very skeptical of any claims of fact that Kemp makes. On a separate note, after last week's meeting, I sent a public records request to Ms. LeGrand. In the subject line, it said 119 request. That means public records request. In violation of Florida law, receipt of my request has not been acknowledged. Given that Creative Loafing already has documented serious violations of Florida's public records law at HART, it is astonishing that a CEO who is facing an investigation would not follow the law. As for the portal that exists for 119 requests, last night I sent an email to Mr. Smith and explained why I, for good reason, at times don't use that portal. But my time is short, so I won't go into further detail on that point. Board members, The eyes of the voters are upon you, not just the union. In your midst, you also have board members who should not be on your board. I'm speaking, of course, of Tyler Hudson and Raina Fraser, who led an effort that unlawfully took over $500 million from the taxpayers. Not 1 cent of that money has been returned. Hudson and Fraser do the bidding.
Your time is
Tampa Bay
out.
Lightning
Your
owner.
time is out, Mr. Rask. Your
So-
3 minutes are
so the
up.
3
Mr.
minutes
Rask,
only
your 3 minutes are
applies
up.
to
Can we
spoken
please?
comments?
Thank you. Okay. Okay, and do we have others?
Yes, ma'am. I have 2 more written comments received via email, both of them. The first one says, "Good afternoon, board members. I would like to reach out to air my concerns of the current leadership/administration of Hillsborough County Area Transit, HART."
Before you begin, are you timing these letters that you're reading to make sure that you
start
read
timing them.
only 3 minutes of them?
Sure.
I think that's appropriate.
I would like to reach out to air my concerns of the current leadership/administration of Hillsborough County Area Transit, HART, and the board's decision in the coming weeks. I have now seen multiple employees get let go due to lack of funding when the current CEO, Adelie LeGrand, is the highest paid CEO in transit around the Bay and in HART history, along with 3 raises since she has been CEO as of 2 years. I also find it extremely disheartening and unjust the way employees have been treated and have gone to the media and the board with their concerns on the bullying and the culture of harassment from the CEO. I know Ms. LeGrand said she wouldn't get involved during the investigation, yet the board and their constituents cannot trust that to be the case. Mrs. LeGrand was trusted to be ethical and just in her position and has shown that this is an issue for her. I ask that you follow suit with Tampa Police in their current situation with the police chief and have Mrs. LeGrand on administrative leave during the investigation. I'd also ask the board to consider administrative leave without pay to help with the cost of the investigation, as this investigation will cost taxpayers a lot of money. And depending on the outcome, they can reimburse Mrs. LeGrand if the investigation can clear her of any wrongdoing. Thank you, James Jackson. And then the final comment received via email. Dear board members, in my 18-plus year career, I have never had the displeasure of working for a leader such as Ms. LeGrand, who lacks vision, self-awareness, motivation, empathy, social skills, fails to communicate effectively, lacks transparency, and does not foster an environment of inclusion and collaboration within the team she was appointed to lead. The CEO may speak eloquently during board meetings and very rare public appearances, but behind closed doors and where it counts, it's all smoke and mirrors. Make no mistake, you will hear some who sing Ms. LeGrand's praises based on their own emotions and/or long-term experiences at heart, but what they lack is actual face time and exposure to the CEO's inconsistent behavior and decision-making. To understand those, it is imperative the board provide a safe place for both former and current employees to speak freely. Allowing the CEO to stay in place during the investigation would not provide that safe space. How can a leader build trust within and among its own leadership team when all are treated differently? While the CEO required administrative staff to return to the office, others within her inner circle were allowed to work fully remote out of the state of Florida, returning only to attend board and/or committee meetings. It is this type of inconsistent leadership and favoritism that allowed Ms. Wright the ability to work for another agency. Although the CEO claims she did not know, which is highly unlikely, had she set the same expectations for Ms. Wright as anyone else, she would have known, given the fact that Ms. Wright had moved back to New Orleans and ceased to be present in the office as she regularly had been. In addition, the current CFO, Loretta Kirk, is not a member of the Tampa community and lives out of state and has not been required to report to the office and lead the finance team. It should be noted Kirk is a part-time CFO. A positive, ethical, transparent, and inclusive leadership style is based on the idea that a leader prioritizes serving the greater good of the customers they serve and their organization while not prioritizing their own objectives. The CEO would have you believe that the release of top-level staff members was an attempt or decision to be smarter with the use of HART's limited dollars. but the fact is the salaries and the individuals released had already been accounted in the FY23 budget. More critical, however, is how does a leader eliminate positions with no backup plan in place for tasks, positions, or decisions those individuals were hired to make, leaving the organization and, most importantly, subordinate employees paralyzed with unanswered questions during a critical end-year closeout process. There were far too many instances of favoritism, intimidation, threats of losing one's job, etc., to put into one letter. With an average of 154 administrative employees within HART, the exit of not less than 1/3 of that number since the CEO's tenure cannot simply be because they could not meet alleged high expectations. Concrete. And that was all that I had signed up at this time. I do not know if there's anyone in the audience.
Okay. Is there anyone in the audience at this time that wishes to speak at public comment? And seeing none and hearing no further public comment, at this time, I am going to move to approval of the minutes. We have two sets of minutes to be approved. One is the November 9th, 2022 meeting, and second is the November 29th, 2022 Special Board of Directors meeting. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved. Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second, and if we could just do it by, is there all in favor? Say aye. Is anyone opposed? Okay. And with that, we've approved the minutes. And now we are going to move to the item on the agenda under discussion and action items. And that's the item that was put forward during the special meeting to discuss the suspension. We did approve an investigation to discuss whether we will move forward with a suspension at this time. And I'll start this discussion by calling on our counsel, David Smith.
Good morning, directors.
One second, did you have a point of order to make?
No, but I'd like to be recognized that I've joined the meeting,
Oh, thank you, yes.
like at 9.
And I did announce that you were coming
Yes.
shortly, so go ahead.
All right.
Mr. Smith.
Good morning. I sent a letter or an email to all of the board members over the weekend, which the public may or may not have seen. I believe it's available on the website, but just to make sure the context is provided for those who are watching, it describes two different options that this board has with respect to the current situation, and that is, how do you handle the investigation? One option is you can suspend the CEO with pay, administrative leave with pay. That is an option. That I refer to that as the easiest. That's a bad terminology. I think it's the most direct and the clearest option, but not the only option. You may also keep the executive director, CEO, in her position as the CEO, as long as you have adequate assurances that there will be no interference with the investigation. Both Ms. LeGrand and her attorney have assured me that in that situation, they would not interfere with the investigation. It is important to remember as we begin our discussions that these matters are always fraught with legal risk. It is important that it is clear that you are looking at the process for the investigation. No one is prejudging guilt or innocence. No judgment is made on the allegation, nor should any judgment be made on the allegation. The question that you are dealing with simply is, what is the best administrative process in light of all the circumstances you must consider as a board member, including the continued operation of HART. So I think that means that you are looking to protect the integrity and the independence of the investigation, and also to assure the public and others that it is independent and has integrity. You also want to be fair to the person who is the object of the investigation, and to the complainants and to the employees. So you have a lot to balance. As we indicated before, and as your discussion will hopefully be clear, nobody has made any determination regarding the merits of the allegations. So hopefully that provides you the context of what I believe is the discussion, which is what is the process that serves HART the best in terms of conducting the investigation and the operations of the agency in the interim. Any questions?
I'd also like to introduce or have you introduce David Adams.
Yes, David Adams is here. He's the Outside Labor and Employment Council. He's in the back, and he's here in case you have any questions. So we've got a couple of us that can, he is the Labor and Employment Council. I am not, but I've been relying on his advice, and he's been very forthcoming and has communicated with me fairly constantly over the weekend. So we have had a lot of colloquy on this issue.
Thank you very much for that. At this time, I'm going to, because I don't have a gavel, I'm going to pass a virtual gavel to Director Williams, our secretary, and I'm going to make a motion. At our last meeting, we authorized an independent investigation of the CEO. That's happening. However, we did not address the question as to whether she would be suspended pending that investigation. I believe suspension is the right thing to do. I'm committed, as I know each and every board member is here at HART, to HART. And this isn't just about one person. This is about HART. And no one is making predeterminations at this time. We have a situation here with Terry Wright holding 2 jobs. I understood Terry to be Ms. LeGrand's de facto chief of staff. And I'm really struggling to understand how this could have happened. We have Nikki Freeney's letter describing all the difficulties with communications. We have complaints about public records. We have this incredible repeated turnover of key administration and management staff. We also have repeated allegations of a toxic workplace. And if I'm not mistaken, I heard some further allegations today in the comments that were made. To conduct an investigation, an independent investigation of this kind, suspension is the best practice. I don't see a reason to make an exception here. I'm not making any assumptions at all or determinations about the outcome of what this investigation will be, but I believe suspension is best. It's best for the integrity of the investigation and for the public to have confidence in the outcome of the investigation. And I think it's best for the integrity of this organization. So here's my motion. I move to suspend the CEO and place her on administrative leave with pay pending the outcome of the investigation, which we asked to be 60 days at the last, when we sanctioned the investigation, when we voted for that. So that's my motion.
Second.
And with that,
Okay, we have a motion on the floor that requests a suspension. Commissioner Kemp, Chair Kemp has the motion. Director Myers, Commissioner Myers has second. Oh, sorry about that. Okay. Can you hear me better? Okay, thank you. Chair Kemp has requested a motion for suspension of Ms. LeGrand, and second by Commissioner Myers. Are there any questions we'd like to discuss at this time? Commissioner, Mayor Castro, you're noted.
Thank you. I disagree, Chair Kemp. We brought Ms. LeGrand in to write this organization, to provide leadership for it, and she has done a great job the past almost 2 years that she has been here. The initial focus that we were looking at was double dipping. I have not seen any evidence of that yet. The second allegation that came up, it was broadened into issues in the work environment. And I can tell you, as was stated by a number of individuals in here, that, and through my experience, that organizational change is not easy. In a lot of instances, there are two things people don't like: the way things are and change. And when you make change, that sometimes makes individuals unhappy. There is a legal definition for a hostile work environment. I haven't heard evidence of that either at this point. Again, we hired her to change this organization for the better, and I think that we should allow her to continue to do her job with strict instructions to steer clear of this organization. And if there is substance to these complaints, it's going to come to light. And as a board, we will be able to address it when it comes to light. But to suspend someone from their position, in my experience, there should be three elements, one of three elements at the very least. That the current leader would do harm to that organization. There's some evidence of wrongdoing, or the allegations are so egregious that they require a separation. And from all that I have seen and heard, none of these exist at this particular time. And at the very time that HART needs leadership, we're talking about benching the leader of HART for up to 2 months. And so we have been through turmoil. I haven't been on this board as long as many have, but we've been through several CEOs, and I believe that we need to ensure, in fairness to the CEO, that we have evidence of wrongdoing before actions are taken. I think it's premature, and I disagree with placing her on leave at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Schisler.
Yes, thank you very much. I, too, disagree with the motion. I understand the criteria that people are working under, the fear of not being able to get the information that they need to, people being reluctant to come forward. I feel comfortable with the proviso of an alternative method if somebody feels they're being threatened, that they have an out. They have a methodology of dealing with it, and we can act upon that. I believe that, as Mayor Castor just said, we brought her in here to clean house and to fix things. We had been in my tenure on our 4th CEO when she came in, and we asked her to clean up a tremendous hole that we were digging out of. And I, too, in the beginning, was wondering about some of the terminations. And I came in and I talked to Ms. LeGrand about it. She was quite open about it. And she said she was doing, in their analysis, we were so top-heavy with upper-level management, we were tripping over ourselves. And you just look at the way, trying to find who to go to for an issue. We had a director of this and a director of that, and she didn't create this. She inherited it. And we asked her to fix this and to clean this up. And I think she's done a very good job with that. I worked very closely with her and Ms. Kirk on the budget this last year. It's as transparent as you can make it. And I've done budgets for 35 years. And this was one that you just had, you read it, you understood it. There was nothing buried, nothing hidden, no secret agendas. And it's a real pleasure to work with this structure. I don't think I have any way in my heart to say, if we suspend her, we're not agreeing with what's being done. Everybody has an opinion, and many people spoke at the last meeting, and then again today, and you look at just one in particular, and say, oh, yeah, we got a problem there, something's wrong. No, you got to look at it in the totality. We cannot judge the totality of her tenure by a handful of letters, okay? We've been here, we've been in the trenches with her all along, all through COVID. COVID was a nightmare for everybody. And it was just very difficult to get anything done. I think she's done a tremendous job. We owe it to her to let her keep going. We have a whole consent agenda, which is moving this organization forward. Advertising issues, legal issues that have to be addressed. We put a stop on that for 60 days. it could be, it could be irreparable damage, at least, in the near term. I disagree with the motion. I will vote against the motion, and I hope that we've seen what Ms. LeGrand has done, and we need to act on that and keep her in position. But I'll tell you what, if in the end we find that the allegations are true, I'll be the first one to make the recommendation in the motion. And I've said this to Ms. LeGrand, that this is the way I feel about it. So I'm just going to be upfront and honest. I will vote against this motion as it stands.
Thank you. Councilmember Vieira.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I appreciate it. I appreciate all the comments that have been made today by everybody from the public. I appreciate Ms. LeGrand being here. I know that's not easy. I just want to say that I really, really do. For me, the real dispositive issue here, and there's good comments made by Councilman Schizler, by Mayor Castor, and others. For me, the real dispositive issue is what appears to be the advice or leading of council when we're given a particular recommendation saying that the safest traditional path to go is for a suspension with pay. Given that that suspension is so that there will be no further entanglements that can be alleged, right, that can be alleged. I personally can honestly say that I withhold any kind of judgment or impressions or anything of that nature on Mrs. LeGrand and the allegations made until we receive the report. I really have a clean slate whenever it comes to that, as I think we all do, or should aspire to do so. But for me, that advice of counsel is the most important thing that I rely upon, and whatnot. I do it with hesitation for the reasons that have been said, very reasonable arguments that have been said, but that I feel by number one, going against what is a proposed journey by counsel, but then number two, just allowing to have potential future entanglements in an environment that is acute, not defining the culpability for that acute environment to either side, but I just think that would invite more potential problems in this. So with hesitation, I go for suspension, but with hesitation, I do. But that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Frazier.
Thank you. I just want to add to the discussion for consideration. One, something that was important to us during the special meeting last week was the short time frame of this investigation. I think we agreed we were looking at hoping to have this wrapped up in 60 days. So something that I'm heavily considering is it more disruptive to this organization to replace the CEO for such a short amount of time and then potentially have her come back in pending the results of the investigation? And to me, that does seem more disruptive, does more harm than good potentially. I'm also concerned that there's precedent in this matter because there have been similar claims launched against the CEO, Carolyn House Stewart, and she was not suspended with pay during the pendency of that investigation. Something that I'm also considering is the fact that our outside counsel stated that there is an alternative that is just as viable, which is us directing the CEO not to interfere with the investigation and setting up the hotline so that employees have an independent way to report any interference that they believe there's investigation that will be handled not by HART and not by counsel that's handling the investigation, but a separate law firm, Gray Robinson. Due process is important, and I think we need to always keep that in mind, but so is the continued operation of the organization in the interim. And I think those things are important to me and that I'm considering, and I don't believe I will support a suspension. I would like to support a direction to the CEO that there be no interference and to set up that alternative method.
Thank you. Commissioner Wastel.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, I believe that your motion is right on the money, and I will be supporting it. And I would invite the board to go and review the Hillsborough HART Transport Authority's own policies, specifically section 140.02, paragraph 1, where there's already been an acknowledgement by the CEO. All of the other allegations that we have to have an investigation for aside, there's already been an acknowledgement, and invite the general counsel to clarify, and there's already been a fallout and repercussions to the double dipping. The person has already admitted to it. The CEO has already made a public statement saying that she, quote, didn't know, where specifically our own policies under HART mandate that she maintain records to be required in the performance of those people that she hires. So I fully support a suspension, and I would say for the viewing audience members that I understand that another way to phrase with pay also means vacation, but it's the options that are ahead of us, and I support the motion.
Thank you. Yes.
What, by your reference to the specific policy, what action are you indicating that Ms. LeGrand didn't take?
Well, there's already an acknowledgement of, quote, she didn't know, but then our policies directly say that the CEO shall maintain such records as may be required in the performance of his or her duties upon the request of the board and those members that are hired. So if she didn't know that someone was double dipping, then clearly we weren't monitoring performance.
I don't really understand that. So there was an expectation that she
And
would receive.
I understand, but I also didn't understand your 3 requirements that aren't listed anywhere in the HART's policies.
I didn't indicate that they were in the policy.
Right, and the one that I've referenced is. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Owen, recognize, please.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. This is a tough decision we're making today. And, you know, to me, one of my big concerns, Mr. Smith, was at our last meeting, I think you kind of made a comment that who would we have to step in? Who could come in and fill her role and do her job? Something to that effect. So one, that is a concern from me, is who do we have? Because it actually, to be honest with you, surprises me that there's not somebody that can step in within this organization and be ready to go. Heaven forbid we have catastrophes. Things happen in business. CEOs resign. So that's one of my concerns. If I could, maybe we could get clarification on how that process would work, and if there was a suspension, who would step into that role?
That's an excellent question, David Smith, for the record. Essentially, what has happened historically is the board has named someone to step in that role. And it generally has been sort of the next person in the chain of command. I do not have a current organization chart, so I can't advise you as to who that would be, but normally it would be the CFO, which I believe is Ms. Kirk. And if she refuses to serve, the next person under her could be the COO. I don't know who that is. Alternatively, this board can consider retaining somebody on an interim basis that's outside of the agency in order to, again, have that additional separation. But the board could not do that today because under the Sunshine Act, we're obligated to put in our agenda actions such as that, and we must have at least 7 days' notice. So you could not address that issue today. The most you could do is address it at a special meeting 7 days from now. I do believe in some conversations with the chair that she has looked at that issue and would probably like to discuss that if there is a vote for suspension.
So if there was suspension today, the CFO then would step into her role immediately, effective immediately?
Ordinarily, that would be the case, but it's not necessarily so. Last time, Ms. Stewart was, I believe, a department head of risk and was thought to be a better person in light of the legal status. She has been a lawyer of many years standing and had great familiarity with the community. So there could be other choices, but ordinarily, without a clear choice by the board, it would fall to the next person in line.
Yeah, thank you for that clarification. Counselor, can I borrow you up here for a second? Labor, Mr. Adams. Mr. Adams?
Yes, good morning.
Good morning. So to me, this investigation is not just about Ms. LeGrand. It's also about Terry Wright. We discussed that at the emergency meeting, that would too be taken into consideration, a full investigation of her actions, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so in this type of situation, and just putting a lawyer hat on right now, Ms. LeGrand would be a key person that I would need full cooperation from during an investigation of Terry Wright, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so to me, I don't see how that doesn't, how she can stay neutral as a CEO if she's actually involved in that part of the investigation. So what we're saying here today, and I take everyone's comments, Mayor and everybody who's spoken today that is against the motion, I'm really trying to weigh it, but I don't see how Ms. LeGrand could step back and be completely independent if we need testimony or her involvement in the investigation of Terry Wright. Because to me, and again, not making a full judgment on Terry Wright's actions, but there could be a breach of contract claim here where we are recouping funds from Terry Wright if in fact she did breach her agreement with us. Is that correct?
That's something I think we should look at carefully.
Okay, all right. And I just wanted clarification on that, so thank you.
You're welcome.
That's
Thank
all
you.
I have.
Thank you. Director Frazier.
Just to follow up with Director Owen, but Terry White's no longer with the organization anymore, so I'm not sure how there would be interference with the investigation if she's not here.
It's a good question, but my understanding is, and I think Councilman Vieira brought this up last time, is that if we have a cause of action against Ms. Wright, I think a lot of that will be fleshed out during this investigation, Mr. Smith, if that's correct.
That will be part of the investigation. That is correct.
Okay, so that's my concern.
Okay, I see a number of hands raised, and you have already spoken. Please let me know if you need additional time. Commissioner Myers.
Thank you. My concern is this can go either way. We know that Ms. LeGrand has come and has met the requirements that this board have asked her to do. And at the same time, there have been some concerns from the employees who work there. But listening at the meeting last week, Ms. LeGrand said she welcomes the investigation. She welcomes the investigation. And we need to get to the bottom of this so that HART has its integrity and the agency can move on from all of this. This has been going on since about June when we started receiving emails from the employees about a hostile work environment. And now we as a board have let it got out of control somewhat. It did do anything when it was first brought to our attention. And now we're faced today whether she should be suspended or remain in her job. And I'm torn which way I'm going to support this, but I look at HART as the community. We have riders. Our ridership, how they feel about HART, the decisions that this board is making. You know, we cannot look at every CEO that comes here and we allow our employees to tell us it's a hostile environment. Because that's what I've heard over the years. I'm a Tampa native. When you don't like someone, that's what comes from HART, from the employees. But we got to have an open door policy that our employees can trust management and management can trust our employees. And so, in all fairness, I'm going to join Ms. LeGrand. She welcomes the investigation so that the agency can move on. And I'll leave it there.
Thank you. Tyler, Director Hudson.
Mr. Adams, come back up.
Yes, good morning again.
Thanks. Is there something about, in the nature of the scope of the investigation that merits one approach or the other, whether administrative leave with pay or the, kind of keep things as they are, but with extra admonitions about not interfering?
Yeah, as counsel spoke, I think it's critically important to ensure a fair investigation without any undue influence. The tricky part here is that every employee in this organization reports to the CEO. And I suggested to Mr. Smith the alternative approach because, again, it's not good to have turnover in an organization at the highest levels, and it creates a tremendous disruption. But at the same time, it's important that those employees feel, and the public feel, that they have protection and they need that protection. And so I think you have to balance, as counsel has indicated, the integrity of the investigation against what's fair to the CEO. And it's a difficult choice. It's a policy decision for the board. It's not one for me to make. As counsel stated, if you want to have a black and white rule, you can do the suspension, and that clearly eliminates the risk. But there are downsides to that also, considering the continuation of the organization and continuity of management during the investigation period. So I'm sorry, I can't really answer your question black and white.
That is an
I think
answer.
it's a
Thanks.
difficult question. Thank you.
Mr. Adams, I have a question for you.
Yes.
Director Williams. What assurance do we have? Do we have something in the documentation if she is not suspended? Does she sign and agree to certain aspects during the investigation? What assurances do we have?
Well, you already have one thing in place, which is the ethics point hotline. So you already have a hotline in place, but unfortunately, the hotline is answered by HART employees, which you, of course, have the potential for, to be influenced. Not that I'm suggesting that would happen. And so I think that's why counsel suggested that he could create a hotline that rings in his office where he would collect the comments. If they relate to the investigation, he would forward those to me that I would use in making conclusions. And if they're, sometimes we get silly ethics points like, I don't like the color of somebody's hair. And obviously, I don't need to hear those, and those can be, excuse me, those can be, sent back to the organization for appropriate follow-up. And so those are the two methodologies that are out there. We talked about actually redirecting the ethics point system to general counsel, but there's some technological issues that he was concerned about, and we weren't sure that that was feasible.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I see no other hands at this time for questions. We'll move forward with the motion by Chair Kemp and second by Commissioner Myers. Danielle, will you please take roll at this time?
Yes, ma'am. Chair Kemp?
Actually, a vote,
Public
please.
comment on the proposition before the board?
That was Mr.
No,
Ross.
no public comment is allowed at this time.
Right. Ms. Jackson, will you take a vote, please?
Yes. Chair Kemp?
Yes.
Director Williams?
No.
Director Castor?
No.
Director Frazier?
No.
Director Hudson?
No.
Director Johnson?
No.
Director Knight?
Yes.
Director Myers?
Yes.
Director Owen?
Yes.
Director Schisler?
No.
Director Vieira?
Yes.
Director Wolstel?
Yes.
The vote is tied, 6-6.
Yep.
So, Mr. Smith, what do we do at this point?
A tie vote is not passage.
Okay, so
I'll
take
hand it back over to you.
And that fails. Okay. With that, I don't know, with regards to the second part, I know it was listed in the agenda about, with regards to the employees, that was a request of, at the request last meeting of Director Williams and Director Knight with regards to the employees that have gone, but I guess, or that were terminated. Was there anything to speak to that?
Madam Chair, I'll respond to that question, but I'd also recommend you go back to the first issue and see if there's an alternative motion as to how to proceed. But with regard to the second item, it looks to have the board become involved in employee issues. There are policies on point that prohibit that from occurring, so that would not be an appropriate action on the board's behalf, and I'd recommend, therefore, you you have to follow your own policies, so you cannot do that.
Okay, and we'll return with an alternative motion.
Okay. I would ask that Mr. Adams come up and take us through exactly how this investigation, the parameters of it, what will be investigated, and how we can ensure the HART organization, this board, and the community that there will be no interference in the investigation, and that if evidence comes to light of violations, that as a board, we will address those again.
Thank you, Mayor Castor. With all due respect, I'm not sure I've put together an entire investigation plan, but I can tell you the basics of what are normally part of an investigation plan. I think it's important to interview, the employees, obviously, who have come forward, and we know their identity as to the issues that have been identified. As I think one of the board members indicated, there's a difference between legal hostile work environment, which is severe or pervasive work environment that's based on a protected conduct. Protected conduct is, race, color, sex, national origin, retaliation, those types of things. So that will be part of the investigation, obviously, but more importantly, your policies also require your employees to treat each other professionally and to act with integrity and those types of things. There have been some, issues that have come forward, at least in the newspapers and other places. I'm not passing judgment on those, but I can read. And that, call into question about that, and the board is thoughtful to have identified the fact that sometimes when employees are unhappy, they make these allegations of hostile work environment, which frankly are often misunderstood by the public or lower level people because they don't understand that they have to be based on a protected characteristic. Nonetheless, you want your leadership to act with integrity and with respect and to, manage the organization to the best of his or her ability and to move it forward. And those are the concerns that came forward today, which I'm pleased to hear. But I think I should probably talk to some of the former employees who have either resigned or been discharged. I think I need to talk to the current employees who've made complaints. And, sometimes in these circumstances, we do like a questionnaire. So for example, if you got a sexual harassment complaint that's anonymous, you don't want to crucify the person who's been accused because it's an anonymous complaint, but you might, send out some questionnaires and ask questions to see where that leads. Ask everybody, how do you feel in your department? Or, you feel like you're being treated fairly in your department? Are there any problems in your department? And a lot of times that will flush out, the issues. I think the most important thing in an investigation like this is to go where the facts lead you. And this board, as council has advised you, is going to become essentially a legislative body and to call upon whether the allegations require additional action. So make sure you act on the facts. I think that's the most important thing. But that's the gist of what I intend to do. And frankly, the tricky part of an investigation like this is you have to go where the facts lead you. And so as the interviews develop, issues will pop up, and the ones that are meritorious, I will try to follow. The ones that don't appear meritorious or where there's bias or ulterior motive, I will try to dismiss to the best of my ability. And I hope that answers your question. I know it's not perfect.
And then what assurances, you mentioned a hotline to Mr. Smith's office for complaints to ensure that this investigation is walled off from the day-to-day activities that Ms. LeGrand will be
Yeah, I don't know that we
heading.
can wall off the investigation. I think we've made a decision to keep her in place, which is a thoughtful decision. But we want to make sure that all employees know that they can contact me, David Adams. You can Google David Adams, Tampa attorney. I will pop up, or General Counsel Smith, to identify if they think anyone who's been asked to participate in the investigation has suffered undue influence, either directly or indirectly, through the CEO, which, again, I don't expect, but we're trying to put safeguards in place to make sure that the investigation and the results of it have good integrity.
Madam Chair, if I could add to that, the point of having us available for a contact is that you can't go to in-house counsel ostensibly if they're managed by the person who's the object of the investigation. I nonetheless have to maintain independence because this board not only will have legislative issues, it'll act in a quasi-judicial capacity in hearing the ultimate results of the investigation and in taking action. That's a different burden. You must have a certain independence in that regard. I, as your counsel, have to have an independence, so I cannot be involved in the investigation. I can, however, receive complaints of interference. and limit it to that. Anything that appears to be substantive with regard to the investigation will be referred to Mr. Adams. I will not deal with it, because when it comes back to you, I have to advise you as an independent attorney. And there's plenty of case law on this, I don't need to elaborate, but I just want to make sure there's both issues there. So in that capacity, we have agreed to receive only communications about whether there's interference, and that only.
Okay.
You first.
Chair.
At this time,
He was first, then I have a question.
okay, okay.
I just, a point of
Director
clarification. So the original motion tied 6-6. So we're not defaulting, assuming then, since we're at a tie, that the other side was also fell if we made a motion to allow her to continue, correct? We're at a standstill?
That's correct.
Okay.
You still need a motion.
Right, there is no acceptance. I just want to make sure that there's no acceptance, or I don't want their assumption to be that we have accepted that she stays on. We're still debating the facts.
Correct.
I have a question for council.
Yes.
In these situations, what is the potential that, so you've already said that you cannot fully, there is no way to fully firewall, safeguard, fallout if the CEO stays on, if there is any type of blowback to lower level employees, accusations from lower level employees that they might have been fired because of that, then the organization will have to incur future expenditures, investigating whether or not those other people, we're now opening ourselves up to potential liability, is my point, because there is no clear path to restrict potential retaliation if she stays on as the acting CEO. Is that correct?
I think, yeah, that is correct. But you also need to consider the continuity of the agency, during the investigation, which has clearly been talked about today.
Thank you, Chair.
Director Hudson.
Yeah, there's been an unusual amount of public interest in these circumstances, and so I know a lot of people don't typically watch these proceedings, but I think it's going to be helpful for you to confirm whether or not you in your role report to anybody that's an employee of HART.
Yes, but at the current time, I report to Brenda Bailey, who I believe is the Director of Legal Services. But for purpose of this engagement, and now that the board has voted, I will prepare an engagement letter that I will send to Mr. Smith indicating that I'm no longer, for this particular assignment, working for Ms. Bailey. And in fact, I'm working for the General Counsel, who of course reports directly to the board. That is an issue because, of course, when this is over, I do still report to Ms. Bailey. But in any event, it's important that we get this done, and I'm happy to do the work, and I think it's important work.
Thanks.
Commissioner Myers.
Thank you. My question to Legal Counsel Smith, if there are any interference, what is the time frame? Do we have to wait till we come back as a board to meet if there's any interference?
Well, bear in mind, first, it will be an allegation of interference. So presumably, if the people feel comfortable, they can contact my office, then they will contact my office and say, I've been interfered with in this manner. And at that point, obviously, we would have to investigate that. You cannot necessarily presuppose those comments are totally accurate. But if, in that instance, it might be necessary to have Mr. Adams evaluate and investigate the scope of the interference because, again, I cannot be involved as prosecuting attorney and advisor to the tribunal. So we're just trying to set up a mechanism for people to feel comfortable with calling if they believe they've been interfered with.
Okay, and is it Director Knight? Thank you.
Thank you. First of all, I'd like to ask, since last meeting, has any memo or emails, anything went out instructing the workers to don't communicate with media or anyone, or no comments, have anything came from the top as far as, and that's my first part of it, and so long. Has anything been put out about the workers or the staff or anybody commenting.
Ms. LeGrand?
Just for a point of clarification, you're asking if a memo went out advising staff to disengage with the media?
Yes.
No.
Okay. The other part is, like the last meeting, in making a motion where we got here, I have a strong concern that the ones that we need to talk to, or the investigation need to include, that they can feel free, have some mechanism that it don't, where they feel going to get some type of retaliation. Even some of the ones who have probably took some severance package or whatever, some happen to know that have really served well and very honorable, and that's my concern. And we all pretty much, including our CEO, agreed to an investigation away and let it take place. We have did this before, and by the way, the last CEO filling in, we was doing the process that you got then. She wasn't. She was a fill-in. She was in interim. Okay, and then there was some other allegations going on then. But my point is, in the past, it's like the CFO, temporary, part-time, you got Mr. Drainsville, and I'm sure others, that if we needed to, and we have in the past, and we have made some decisions, and this HART board have continued on making some great decisions while the process take place. I just want, I wish it was a way and can feel confidence that nobody get hurt in the process or get fired or whatever because whatever reason. We need to have some safeguard in place, and through council, general counsel, whoever, how can we do that to protect and keep the buses running, the employees, and look at some of the things that may come up from the past decisions? Thank you.
Can either of the council speak to that?
I believe the nature of the inquiry was whether the protections that we intend to put in place will be adequate to make the employees and others feel comfortable and safe to participate in the investigation.
Yes.
Am I paraphrasing that? Okay.
Yes.
I can't guarantee that. Obviously, I don't know the employees, they don't know me. Contacting my law firm might be somewhat intimidating for employees and complainants. I'm very easy to get along with, but like I said, they don't know me, so I can't guarantee that is going to be a great process. It is a process we're trying to establish to maintain the independence and integrity if you take this alternative route, but nothing about this process is going to be easy.
And does
Yes.
Mr. Adam
I think
have?
council's, discussed it, adequately. This is not an easy situation. Like I said, you have to balance the continued operations of the organization. We have riders who need to be transported places, and you need to have something in place if you were to, go a different direction. But I think that's the best we can do, short of moving the ethics point to an independent party, is to provide the telephone number. I think it might be helpful for council to go ahead and say it here in the meeting if he doesn't mind, and how we can be reached so that we can put this system in place. It's not perfect, but it does provide reasonable assurance that employees will at least have a method for reaching out to board counsel and the board in the event they feel like they've been pressured one way or another in the investigation.
There's a few other people before, I think, Director Schisler.
Oh, did you say me?
No, Director Schisler, right? Do you want to speak?
Yes, I may, if I may.
Yes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm a simple kind of guy. We're sitting here trying to put in safeguards and everything else. Ms. LeGrand, do you promise to let this investigation proceed in the manner that this board is expecting it to? without entering any interference, without any undue pressure on any individual, any current, former, future, any employee that is in regard to this. You promise to do that and let this board move forward and run, and help you run the organization.
Madam Chair, may I respond? Director Schisler, I definitely agree to not interfere with the process. In addition, under my attorney's letterhead, we sent a letter to Mr. Smith to put in writing to document that I have no desire to interfere with the process. As I've stated before, it is my intention that the process moves forward as quickly as possible. As we've talked about this over the last, I want to say, 3 meetings, this is a lot. As I mentioned, it's a lot for all of us. It's a lot for the board, it's a lot for me, it's a lot for staff, it's a lot for the community, and it's my desire for this to move as quickly as possible so we can go back to focusing on the work that we've been committed to doing. And when I say we, I mean it's we, it's all of us that have been committed to raising the bar and making the changes that are necessary to elevate the brand of HART. We all recognize that change is hard. When I started this job, there was an acknowledgement that a lot needed to be addressed. Changing, a budgetary status is a little easier, right? It's numbers, you understand what the forecasts are, you understand where you have to apply the changes. Changing culture is a lot harder. It's going to take several more years to really delve into changing a culture of an organization, but it requires the work and it requires commitment from the board as well as from the leadership team. So for me, I still am passionate about this space. I was a bit overwhelmed to hear people come up today. I was not expecting that. I'm not a very emotional person. Those of you who know me, you know I'm an introvert, so pretty much, spend a lot of time in my head, if you will. But the community deserves the best, and what we're discussing today does not reflect the best. And I do welcome this investigation so we can get on the other side and that they can have the facts and they can understand what is going on here. And the conversation is not being consumed by one side or the other, but it's going to be focused on the facts, as Mr. Adams stated. But in order for us to do that, there has to be a commitment, and you have to believe that I am committed to moving everything forward and not engaging. If there's other safeguards as we go through the process that you'd like to ensure that we put in place, I'm more than open and welcome to hearing about those. But, again, my hope is that this will move as quickly as possible so that we can get some closure and then we can continue moving forward and providing the best service possible to the community. So thank you.
And who else do we have next?
You can go first.
Director Frazier or Director?
Yes, so it appears to me, based on the email that we received from council, that to set up this alternative, we need, one, I think Director Schilsler has directly asked the CEO if she intends to interfere and is instructing her not to, but one, to instruct the CEO not to interfere with the investigation, and two, to set up the hotline for independent reporting of any interference during the investigation. And so, Council Adams, are those the 2 items that we need to basically establish?
I believe that would be appropriate.
Okay, and I make a motion to do that.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Director Frazier with seconds by Directors Schisler and Williams. Are there comments with regards to this? Okay, seeing no further discussion of this item, can we please do a roll call vote?
Chair Kemp?
Yes.
Director Williams?
Yes.
Director Castor?
Yes.
Director Frazier?
Yes.
Director Hudson?
Yes.
Director Johnson?
Yes.
Director Knight?
Yes.
Director Myers?
Yes.
Director Owen?
Yes.
Director Schisler?
Yes.
Director Vieira? Director Woolstel?
No.
The motion passes.
Okay.
You took no comment on the proposition before the board.
Can we please I don't understand why public comment is still, why that is still being allowed at this time, why that person is on the microphone. Do we have a mechanism?
I have expelled him for the third time.
Okay. Have you muted all of the calls?
I have expelled him for the meeting for the third time, Madam Chair.
Okay.
Commissioner Camp.
Yes. And with that, we are going to, well, we've been asked by Director Williams if we could move, rather than the presentations, which don't require votes, if we can move to the consent agenda at this time. That would be the only next item that we have to vote on.
I believe Director Wassel wishes to be recognized on that, too.
Yes.
Hi, Madam Chair. I would like, and I asked for procedural, so however this board normally does it, consent agenda item number 8C to be divided from the consent.
So you'd like to remove 8C?
You can do it a number of ways, division of the question, however you'd like.
Historically, as I understand it, whenever a director is asked to have an item removed from the consent agenda, it is done so without motion and vote. But you can do a motion and vote, but I thought that you just honor any director's request.
Okay, but with that, so then we can move this to next month's agenda?
You can move the consent agenda minus 8C and have the discussion and approval of that and move it to the next agenda or subsequent discussion in this meeting.
Okay. I'll just say that at this time, I'd like to remove that for the next agenda, next month, because we do not have anyone here to speak to that item. Yes.
Yeah, also on that item, I don't recall that ever coming toward the Finance and Auditing Committee.
It did come forward on that, but I think we need to move it with notice to have a discussion.
No objection.
Okay.
Chair,
So,
can I ask a question?
Yes.
Can we have someone comment on whether, is there anything time sensitive in there that we can effectively? move
There
it
is
to
not.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so with that, we will move consent agenda without 8C to be rescheduled at the next meeting. And if we can.
Move to approve.
Okay, well, we have a motion to approve in a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. And so then we will move then to the presentations at this time.
And I will have to vacate, but Julia Mandel's here to take over. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. The first presentation, do we have the first presentation for the Transit Development Plan 2023 to 2032, major update from Mr. Omar Alvarado?
Good morning, Chair, members of the board, Ms. LeGrand. My name is Omar Alvarado. I'm the Chief Delivery Officer. Just wanted to take you guys once again through the final of the Transit Development Plan here. So as you guys have seen through our process over the past couple months, we've shown you the TDP here. Sorry, Mike, can you help me move this over? 1 second, sorry. Yeah, the focus was wrong. Thank you. Sorry about that. So So first, I wanted to update everyone on FDOT's comments in terms of our transit development plan. We came to you earlier this year. We submitted our TDP to FDOT in September. They have about a 60-day timeline where they provide comments. Really minimal comments from them. The comments were really just related to our financial tables and making sure we provided some kind of expansive information on the tables. So we added a new project-level financial plan. We summarized some of the revenue sources, and then they had some kind of high-level comments for our next update for next year, really just related to, synthesizing the document a little better, showing our T-best assumptions, which is our ridership assumptions a little better, and again, just reiterating the details on the financial plan. So I want to just go over again some of the transit needs that we identified throughout the transit development process through surveys, O&D from customers and things of that sort. Again, all these pieces here are unfunded, but this really just summarizes the increases in headway or the increases in frequency rather, that customers asked throughout the process. And as we went through this process, Commissioner Kemp and some others on the board asked for a little more detail in terms of what the impact would be. So what you see in front of you is the cost in terms of capital dollars, so buying additional vehicles, and the operating cost per year to take some of these routes from every 30 minutes to 15, from every 60 to 30 in the peak. And these are all the routes that you guys saw on that first slide that are in your packets as well. Thank you very much. That are in your packets as well. Again, just reiterate or expanding again on some of those costs as well. So just to highlight this, the portion of the plan that takes routes from every 15, every 30 would be $18 million on the capital side and $13.6 million. And then the second piece here is a $12 million capital cost with about a $10 million yearly operational cost. Again, this is just our unfunded portion of the plan, just showing you some of the additional details of what it would take to get to these levels. Next piece here, we showed this during the committee meetings, but just showing you guys the correlation between ridership and frequency. So as you can see, 8 of our top 10 routes are our most frequent routes. As many of you know, 2/3 of our system runs every 60 minutes. So there's a really strong correlation between ridership and that frequency. And the last request was obviously related to our performance metrics. So before we went into HART's metrics, I wanted to show you guys how, this agency, also the country and the state, performed in 2021. So what you'll see here is the national average for what's called fare box recovery, and also the Florida state average for that as well, which is pretty much just the percentage of the cost, operational cost that we receive back in the fare box in terms of how customers, or in terms of customer payment, rather. So really across the state in FY 2021, HART was the second highest performance, second only to Lynx in Orlando. And in your packets, you'll find the individual financial performance and operational performance for FY 22 for the entire system, broken out by the service type, so weekday, Saturday, Sunday. Some key things to really look at here is our fare box recovery is going up. So from 2021 to 2022, we are seeing an increase in our fare box recovery. You'll also see in terms of our passengers per platform hour, and just to explain what a platform hour is, it's the minute the vehicle leaves the garage to the minute it comes back. An in-service revenue hour includes the layover time between trips, so it's the actual revenue trip time, plus the time in between each trip for operators to have recovery time, so that next trip leaves on time. And revenue time is exactly what it sounds. It's the time that the bus is in revenue service. So these metrics are seeing an improvement again year over year as well. And here's our top 5 performing routes from a fare box recovery standpoint, and also our bottom 5 routes from that perspective as well. Again, here you'll see that our top 5 performing routes are also some of our more frequent routes, and our bottom 5 routes are some of our least frequent routes, including some of the routes that only have 3 trips in each direction, so 3 peak directional trips in the morning, 3 peak directional trips in the afternoon as well. And that is the update on the transit development plan. Any questions?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Director Hudson.
Hey, thanks. 2 quick questions. One, the CapEx and OpEx figures that you provide, those are obviously based on the presumption that there's no reduction in service elsewhere, right? That's new money that we'd have to find.
That is just the raw cost. Sure. So whether that comes from recalibrating and getting from other services or just, new money as well, that's just what the pure cost of that increase would be.
So service cuts elsewhere could lessen the blow a little bit.
Correct.
And then, can you explain a little bit some of the factors, not with any specific routes, but some of the factors that go into the variability of capital costs and operating? I mean, certainly, if a route's longer, perhaps that's a more fuel-intensive route. Anything else we should be aware of? Because there's more variability than I would have thought.
Yeah,
amongst the
so
CapEx.
frequency is a big one as well. The amount of time, obviously, it takes to go from the beginning of the line to the end of the line, what we call cycle time. So that increases the amount of vehicles per route that you'll need. The one that I'd say is relatively fixed right now is that capital cost. The assumption we have in here right now is about $750,000 per vehicle that's purchased.
I have a question.
Are there any other?
On your cost per rider and subsidy per rider, do those metrics state that the total cost per ride is $16 or that the total cost is $788 and the subsidy is $722?
So the subsidy is $722.
So the
and
total
per
cost is
rider-
$788, so each rider is ultimately only paying 66 cents a ride?
That's the average per rider at this point, correct?
Thank you.
You're welcome. And that's about a 20% increase from last year, so.
Are there any other questions at this time? Okay. Did you have a question, Director Hudson? No, sorry. Oh, okay. Okay. Seeing no other questions, we can move on to the next presentation.
All right, so I'm going to introduce Tim Krobins from Nelson Nygaard. His team has been assisting us in terms of the March service changes, so I wanted him to spend some time with you guys to talk about the
Thank you.
proposed changes for March. Thank you. Tim.
Thank you, Board Chair and Board members. As Omar had mentioned, I'd like to go through the recommended service changes for March of 2023. In order to come up with these service changes, we went through a study over the last year. Many of you probably have seen me at either a committee meeting or a board meeting in the past presenting some of our analysis. That analysis looked at the routes very much in depth, looked at routes not only at a route level, but at a segment level and a stop level throughout the system, looked at where things were productive and where things were not. As part of that study, which we call the network redesign or right sizing, we had a series of guiding principles. And I'll just note a few of them here that are really important. And this you very much do know is we have to stay within existing resources. And so some of the questions that were just asked on the TDP, is there a way to find resources within what you do today and reallocate them? And that was really the essence of our effort. As part of that, we still want to serve those communities that really do need the service. We want to cut out of direction travel, make things more streamlined, get people to where they want to go much quicker. But we also want to identify alternative ways of delivering the service, things like microtransit mobility on demand. As part of that framework for putting together these recommendations, we want to look at ways of eliminating low ridership trips within the system in the early morning and late evening hours, look at splitting long routes to increase reliability in the system. And I think as Mr. Alvarado had mentioned in the TDP, when a route is very long, it's hard to maintain on-time performance. It also has, it makes it difficult for the bus operators to get out of the seat and use the restrooms in a timely manner. Driving 2 hours or 2.5 hours straight is very difficult to maintain service continuity. So we've also looked at altering route alignments and improving frequencies. So some of the things that were mentioned in the TDP, we did find some resources in part of this effort to reallocate to improve frequencies on a number of routes. And we're also introducing new routes and services through external funding as part of this service change in March of 2023. We went through a very extensive supply and demand analysis, and you may have seen this slide in earlier presentations, but what it really shows is on a route level basis, frequency across the day, as well as the span of service hours across the day on services. You'll notice that some of the routes in parts of the day run much later than others. One of the difficulties with running, say, 5 or 6 routes late into the evening is a rider will go across the system and then all of a sudden can't complete their trip because there's no more services out there. Two ways to fix that. You bring all the services out later, which is unproductive use of resources and with low ridership return, or you trim back some of those span of service hours so that everybody has a full network throughout the course of the day. One of our recommendations is to do just that, is trimming some of the trips at the fringes of the service day. As you see on this map, there's a number of routes that really have high productivity and stops. Florida, Nebraska, Hillsborough, MLK, parts of Fletcher, parts of Bush, parts of Waters, all have very high productivity, areas that tend to have higher frequency services as well. So as I mentioned, one of our first things is repurposing or moving some of the resources and kind of trimming the fringes of the service span to be able to use those resources where they'll be more productive and get a better return on your investment of putting service out on the street. And there's a whole list of them here in your packet, and there's also a list that don't have any span of service changes there as well. So I'd like to go through an overview of the recommendations for March of 2023. There's a number of route splits, as I mentioned before, and I'll get into each one of these in more detail in the following slides. There's also some minor routing changes. A number of routes are listed here. Medium routing changes incur, putting routes on new roads. And then major changes is either truncating routes or moving them completely out of a specific area. And we'll go over those specifically in the following slides. There's a number of routes that have no changes recommended to them. They're operating well, they serve the clients well, they get people across the system well. We identified new routes in the system. They're primarily funded by FDOT or other funding mechanisms, partners within the community, and those I'll go over as well as we eliminated one route in the system. And actually the route that is the poorest performer on your fare box recovery is the one that we're recommending for elimination. It's a very much just peak hour service, and that's the Route 25. So what were we able to achieve with the reallocation of resources here? We were able to actually increase the frequencies during peak and middays on 6 routes from 60 to 30-minute frequencies. Now, one of those involves a split of the route, and that's the Route 39, in which we're actually decreasing the western portion, the frequency out on Gun Highway. It is the lower productive piece of that route, whereas the portion east of Florida Avenue will continue to run at 30-minute frequencies. There's a number of routes here listed again that have no changes proposed to them as far as frequencies. First, I'd like to go over the split routes. The first one is the Route 6 in the system. It is one from downtown, actually past your maintenance facility on 21st to Net Park Transit Center out on Hillsborough, and then all the way up to the UATC, University Area Transit Center, up near USF. Our proposal is to cut that in half, again, to manage the on-time performance, give operators a chance to get out of the seat. There is a little bit of modifications in the frequencies and as you see on the right side of the page by time period, a little bit trimming back on the frequencies in the later periods, as well as trimming on the service hours back to about 11 p.m. Here is the other portion of that route, which we'll call the 56, which is on 56th Street, very appropriate. Very much the same modifications in frequencies as well as the span of service hours later in the evenings. Route 30 is Kennedy Boulevard. It also goes out through Town and Country to the Northwest Transit Center. It's a very long route, goes through the airport. We've broken that up into 2 routes, Kennedy piece, and then the piece that goes from West Shore Transit Center out through Town and Country. No changes in the frequencies, slight change in cutting back about an hour in the evening. When you look at the northwestern part of the former Route 30, now called the Route 35, there's been some cleanup in the airport area to streamline that service and speed the service not only to the airport but to the West Shore Transit Center. Fletcher Avenue, Northdale. This route's a very long route as well, serving Fletcher Avenue, but most of the productivity is actually west of the UATC Transit Center, the University Area Transit Center, up to Northdale. So what we're proposing is to keep that as a fixed route piece, but then transition the western part of it to more of a flex on-demand zone. The ridership is lower in that area, And it also allows us to expand the area in which we serve and cover a greater area with on-demand service, which is actually a better service for the area with greater access. Bush Boulevard, this is one that runs from the Northwest Transit Center all the way to the Net Park Transit Center on East Hillsborough. Very much on Gun Highway Bush most of the way, but it does travel currently down 56th Street. One of the proposals that we have in here is to split this route and bring it into Yukon Transit Center Park and Ride, and run the western part as a Route 40 at 60 minutes and the eastern part at 30 minutes, but also modify the eastern part to go out to the Amazon Fulfillment Center out on Temple Terrace Highway and Harding Road, excuse me. So the remaining piece on Gun Highway from Yukon West would continue at 60 minutes versus 30, which is more appropriate to its productivity. Major alignment changes, and we're almost done here. These are some of the final recommendations. The Route 9, we are proposing to truncate at Yukon Park and Ride and have a little bit more clean, straight line alignment through Ybor City to downtown to the Mary Street Transit Center. Now, that northern portion of the route, it's not going away on 30th Street. It actually will be covered with the Route 16, and the frequency will be 30 minutes on that portion of 30th Street versus 60 as it's operated currently on the Route 9. Route 14, Armenia Howard. It currently operates down Howard down to Bayshore Boulevard. We've proposed to take that across Swan and down McDill. The ridership south where it currently goes is very minimal, and some of the walk distances from Soho are still very close to the Route 14. This is another route they're proposing to increase to 30 minutes. On the north side of the route, there's a portion of the alignment that runs along Linebaugh. We're actually proposing to remove that portion. The ridership is pretty low in that portion, and the ridership that does occur is close to Foote Avenue, where you have 15-minute service. This also allows us to create additional service on Bush from the high school into Yukon with both the 40 at 60-minute service and the 14 at 30. So it improves services for that segment of the system. I mentioned the Route 16 earlier. It does extend beyond the Yukon Park and Ride and goes up 30th Street to the University Area Transit Center, again providing better frequency on 30th Street than is currently provided by the Route 9. And it does extend and streamline this route and provide a one-seat ride all the way from the west side of your system to the University Area Transit Center. New routes, this is an FDOT-sponsored route on mainly on Main and Spruce between downtown and the West Shore Area Transit Center, serving the mall as well along the way. It's 60-minute routes, operate between 6 a.m. and approximately 10 p.m. SLY is a new route we were able to achieve through the efficiencies in the system. And many of you may remember the SLY route from many, many years ago. And through budgetary constraints over the years, it was cut. It was a decent route, and it does actually provide east-west connectivity between your Route 16 and your Route 34 today. That's not there. There's a large gap of east-west connectivity there. We were able to find a way through our efficiencies to actually put this route in. It'll be put in at 45-minute frequencies. We hesitated to put it in at 60 because we're trying to take 60-minute routes and move them to 30 minutes. But 45 minutes is a pretty good start on this route, and it was what we can afford with the resources that we were able to find in our analysis. Circulators, Uptown Circulator. This is more of a circulator in the area. I think there's 25% or so of the residents in this area that have zero cars. So they're very transit dependent. This will allow this route to do a little flexing as well to serve some new areas. 15 minutes service in this area. A lot of trips are being made in this area, and it would operate. And this is funded by a combination of FDOT and funding partners within the university area to implement this service. So not a HART. Downtown, there's been a lot of discussion over the years about how do we serve downtown with circulators. We've put together 3 phases of implementation. We've been looking at with some external funding partners to enable this service and put in service in the downtown area to service. So a lot of the details are actually still being worked out, and the funding for that is still being worked out. But this is one of the things that we potentially look at for implementation in March as well, is some better downtown circulation. So there'll be more details coming back to the board on how that flushes out over the following month or so. And lastly, the schedule. I mentioned earlier, we've been working on this for about a year now. A lot of analysis, market analysis, looking at ways to reallocate resources, and then also looking at ways in several points along this last year to improve on-time performance and reallocate running times, do what we do is in scheduling called interlining, where we link routes together to be able to actually save the buses that are required to serve them. We're in the process, right? We've gone through an operations review, including a lot of the staff members and operations drivers and the operations management staff to get input. We're currently out on the street right now getting public input, not just your traditional public meetings, but going out, talking to people on buses, talking to people at transit centers, getting their inputs on these recommended service changes. We'll be coming back to you guys in January for board approval. And then once that is approved, we'll be going through a pretty extensive training program to get all the bus operators, street supervisors, dispatchers, customer service, everybody to understand what those changes are and be able to help our customers when those are in place in February, on February 5th. I mean, March 5th, excuse me. With that, I open up to any questions.
Do we have questions
I
or
have a
comments?
question. Thank you for this work. It really is incredible. One of the things that I would like to see if your staff could present in the end of this, before the operator training, is just the data on the public engagement, exactly how many individuals were spoken to, where at, so that we can get a feeling, not a feeling, an assurance that the communities, the actual public that HART is serving had input. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Yes, Director Hudson.
And apologies to my fellow directors, I got to leave to the airport after this. A compliment and a question. I think it's really tough to visualize span and frequency changes, given that we've got a pretty good-sized county here. And I thought your slides did a really great job sort of showing the status quo and what the changes are. So kudos on the visualization. There's a lot of details here. You talk about minor changes to Route 1. What are those changes?
Currently, the inbound only travels a little farther south into downtown before it travels north to the Marion Street Transit Center. It will directly go to the Marion Street Transit Center versus going downtown.
Got it.
Currently, only inbound does that. The outbound does not do that. So we'll make it consistent with
So
inbound and outbound.
I'd expect between now and January to see some pretty substantial justification for that. I mean, in my view, Route 1 is sort of a flagship route. It works well. I think it's second or third on fare box recovery. Its current inbound connects it to the streetcar, which also works pretty well. So any changes that jeopardize and take away that bridge between sort of the Heights, Florida, Tampa corridor down into the streetcar, I would view really skeptically. But you all are the experts. So I think that's a fairly major change that we'd want to see some more details on. Thank you.
Any other comments?
Commissioner, may I say something? So I just want to add one thing. First, I want to recognize that Tim used to work here at HART in the 80s. So he is our consultant today, but he's quite familiar with the routes, and I think that's why you saw in the graphics how clean and clear it is, because he's very familiar with our community. And I think Sly was actually a route when you were here, right?
It was.
Right, so he knows what we had before and what makes sense to bring back. So that was one thing. And the other thing is, when we make some of these changes, like Route 1, we do look at the boardings and the alightings associated with the changes that we're going to make. So those are the people that get on and off of the bus at those stops. And for Route 1, the boarding and alightings going from Marion downtown are next to none. So even though it seems like it would make a lot of sense that people would take the bus to connect to the streetcar downtown, we're not experiencing that. But we'll be able to come back at the next meeting and show the actual numbers.
There's one item that I didn't mention in the presentation is that there was an onboard survey that was conducted last fall, September, October, in which we looked at the boarding and alighting locations as well as the true origins and destinations. And that was part of the information going into the recommendations. It helped us understand, are people truly going to downtown, or is there really true destination somewhere beyond downtown on another route, and they're just using downtown as a transfer location? That really played in on how we were modifying our routes, ensuring that we're trying to get people faster to where they want to go versus, including additional transfers.
And I'll just say that I have actually been, not with you, but with Mr. Alvarado, and looked at quite a bit of this. And, I've been concerned for a long time about the long routes where a small part of it is not very productive, but much of it is. And what that does is makes the system, as you know, pretty ineffective and also doesn't use our resources as well. So those, for the most part, and of course, I don't have all the information at my hand, but those are kinds of some of the suspicions I had about how we could increase our productivity or should, or our availability. I'm very pleased to see the SLY route back. We did have the SLY route since I've been here, which is 6 years. It initially, it was taken out, I believe, during the Mission Max cuts that were made because of budget shortages that we were looking at and trying to figure out how we could pay for our services. So I'm very pleased to see that back, because there was a lot of discontent with that. We had many people here talking with regards to that. Also, in terms of the circulator, I'm just wondering, the HART Flex up in the Citrus Park area, which seems to make more sense not to have the regular service here. It's one of the areas I was wondering about. But do we cost out, like how, maybe that isn't a question for you, maybe that's a question for someone else, but costing out like the cost-benefit analysis of that service for that area?
Yeah.
I'm just concerned. I don't want to go from into more intense costs, with serving fewer residents.
Yeah, I mean, there is a cost-benefit analysis completed between any kind of recommendation to do a micro mobility on demand service in relation to a fixed route. One of the things is managing those costs within your mobility on demand zone as you implement it. The challenge is that with your current fixed route, the options are either deleted altogether because it doesn't perform well enough on its own, or find an alternative method that can be cost-effective, and that's why the mobility on demand is often recommended. What it does do, though, is it does provide a bigger area of service, which, if you think about a fixed route, people have to walk to it. It's typically not more than a quarter, maybe a third mile. People are willing to walk to that service. With mobility on demand, we're coming much closer to them. So from a community benefit, it's much greater. Now, again, the cost benefit is you have to manage those costs when you implement it, and what level of response you're providing in that zone versus the cost of the fixed route.
So is the idea to have a limited budget for that? Will people contact HART? We had done micromanagement services since I've been here, and it didn't work out well. For one thing, it was a 3-year service funded by FDOT. As I understood, I found out after 2 years of questioning that we were paying, it was under 3 miles. We were paying $16, actually $16 per trip was being paid for that. We were charging $3, but we had to put it down to $1 in one of the areas where it was unaffordable to people. We had 3 miles, and they were dropped at the nearest stop. One of the most popular places was the Brandon Mall, because that's where the service was. But it was, we had multiple complaints. The calls for service didn't come to HART. We had complaints all the time that they were, never responded to. They didn't get service. It was a very expensive service for us to subsidize, and if FDOT hadn't been doing it, we couldn't have continued it. So I'm just very concerned about how that service is implemented and what kinds of, guidelines are put with regards to it and our costs. And I think we have to understand and know that as we move forward, because it could be more costly than putting bus service out there. That's also not, effective and a good use of our resources. So do you do that analysis and make a recommendation, or how does that work?
Yeah, yes, we do. And what we can do is come back at the next board meeting and give you a little bit more details on the recommendations, particularly for this area. Also with regards to how it is going to be operated and what are the parameters for requesting the service as far as flexing off of a general path, which is called flex routing. So we'd be happy to come back and present some more details on that next.
We're going to be voting on this in January, correct? So I guess for huh? Okay, we can do it at December, because I think that'd be important. I know that there's been multiple years of the USF circulator that's been discussed without other funding being brought forward for it, other than HART or the county commission at the time. So I'm also interested in making sure about the financing for that as well. But I think, I'm pleased. And are these not going to just be a PowerPoint, but are we getting a report that will be sent to us with all this analysis?
So just one point I do want to mention. Since this service change in March is significant, we have to follow Title VI. And Title VI requires us to do subsequent analysis to show that there aren't any disparate burdens to low-income minority populations with our service changes. So a lot of what you're asking for, we are actually in the process of developing to go into our Title VI report, which will have to be submitted. So after this meeting, we'll meet and give you a clear understanding of the entire process for the Title VI report, as well as the updated information that you're asking for December committee.
Great. And I do appreciate having the consultant that prepared the report in also to kind of go through it with us and answer the questions. I think it's I've been very pleased to have us move forward in this way, as everyone knows, actually. So I'm pleased to see it, and I've been trying to follow it as closely as I could. But thank you for the presentation.
Thank you. Any other questions?
I don't see any further questions, so I think with that, thank you. Okay, and at this time, I believe we are at the Chief Executive, CEO's report.
So just one thing quickly, I wanted to share that the RAISE grants are out. That's the grant that we are going to go after to get the rest of the money for the heavy maintenance facility. That grant is due February 28th. We're working to develop the grant. We have to do, for this type of grant, we have to do a cost-benefit analysis, so we do have outside help with that. In addition, I just wanted to share that for what I was told actually this morning, that there's an expectation that the bus and bus facilities grant will be released Q1 of '23. They're thinking in January. So the team is also getting ready to resubmit on that. Again, as you recall, we have $75 million of the $100 million needed for the heavy maintenance facility. So we're going after these grants to bridge the gap to get the additional $25 million. So that was just my update for today.
Thank you for that. And at this time, we will move to the chair's report, which I do not, I don't have much to add to our meeting today. We've had a pretty full agenda.
Can I talk about this?
I'm sorry.
Your chair's report, you're going to talk about the calendar for the next.
Oh, well, I did not, okay, I see. Yeah. We have presented now a calendar. Ms. LeGrand I don't know if all the board knows about this, or actually.
It's in the packet.
I know it's in the packet, but not everybody sees necessarily, especially when there's a lot of other issues in the packet. And I just learned last week that a schedule's been developed here to move the meetings to Tuesday. And I think the question about the meetings were that with Monday, we found ourselves, without a day kind of to work on things often. Things fell on the weekends, and it made for a lot of difficulty. I did not get a chance as much to review this, but I know one of the issues was one of the first meetings falling on a land use meeting. So you have changed meetings to Tuesday, which, but looked at I know you said you looked at city council and county commission meetings that were set. I don't know if everyone is aware of this new schedule in your packet. And the suggestion is that we do regular Board of Directors meeting. The next one would be Tuesday, January 17th. And and following that, we just have a Tuesday schedule. So I don't know if there's any comments to be made at this time.
I'll just
Okay.
say that the only thing we've done here is instead of the first Monday of the month and then 2 weeks later for committee, we're going with Tuesdays, just hoping that we can get better quorum representation and not just starting on the very first day at 9 o'clock in the morning. So
It can be
those are the
very
only changes.
difficult.
Yes.
So that's in your packet, yes,
I'm
Commissioner
not sure
Myers.
if it would conflict with some other boards that I'm serving on, but it seems like we always have a good quorum for our Monday meetings, and maybe what we should have considered was the change when it fell on the first Monday to move it later, just for that particular case-by-case Monday meeting, instead of changing everything to Tuesday.
If I may, Madam Chair? I think
Yes.
that's a great point. If it was moved maybe a little bit later in the morning rather than a Tuesday, when we have board meetings on Wednesdays, and that we're preparing for as well. So I would join in on Commissioner Myers' suggestions.
I don't know that we have
Director
enough
Schizler.
directors here. I'm sorry, thank you. I don't know we have enough directors here to fully explore their individual needs. Maybe we could just query the board for the next meeting rather than try to make a decision now.
I think that would be something that we should do. And maybe you could give two options, and one would be Monday afternoon. Is that, because that's what I'm hearing, might be an option? And then Tuesdays with this schedule, okay?
No
So
problem.
that, because we don't know about the other board members that aren't here, and I have a feeling not very many people probably saw this in their packets.
We'll send out a standalone correspondence on the schedule, and we'll provide two options, Monday afternoon as well as Tuesday.
Okay, okay. And with that, we can move to the general counsel's report.
Yes, for the record, Julia Mandel, David Smith had to leave the meeting, but he did want me to follow up on providing for the record a phone number to call Gray Robinson if any need arises in that regard. The number is 813-273-5024. And in addition, I'll give my email address, which is Julia, JULIA.Mandel, MANDELL, @gray, GRAY-robinson.com. The same address would be for David Smith as David, DAVID.Smith, SMITH, @grayrobinson.com, the same. And you can also Google it if you need to find the address. In addition, as part of the agenda for today on your backup is the discussion of the committees, choosing committees as well as the election of officers, which will occur at your first meeting in January. The general counsel conducts that during the time of the meeting, but prior to that meeting, there's a checklist of items of different committees that you can have your preference to serve on. If you could please get that into staff as soon as possible, so that way, when we get into our January meeting, that's already out there, and we'll be able to go through those as quickly as possible to identify the committees committees that different members want to serve on and to get those selections made as quickly as possible. I'm also available for any questions offline on that, but I've had a long day, so I figure we'll let that go ahead and review it, and we'll look at that towards January. Thank you.
Okay. And with that,
Could you
yes,
repeat the
Commissioner
phone
Myers.
number again, please?
Sure. The phone number for Gray Robinson is 813-273-5024.
And with that, is there any old business? Yes, Commissioner Myers.
Yep, thank you, Madam Chair. I'd just like to ask, I had the opportunity last week to visit the our three transit stations, and Ms. LeGrand had informed me that the Marion Transit restroom had been, is open now. And I was at the, I guess call it East Lake Mall? Okay, East Lake, and University. Uh-huh. They're not open. And I know we were talking about this back in August, about the restrooms for our ridership. Ms. LeGrand, I'm going to ask you to give us an update, and I'm going to ask that it be added to every monthly meeting regarding these restrooms, because it's almost 4 months now that our ridership cannot use the restrooms at our facilities.
Ms. LeGrand.
Yes, and I also have in the audience Mr. Dale Smith, who is our Director of Facilities. So Dale, if you'll come to the podium, please. So right now, currently, we have the Marion Transit Center restrooms are open, and the University Area Transit Center is open. So those are the two that are open now. I know we're working on a third one to bring online. So Mr. Smith, if you can just share overall where we are in the process.
Certainly. Madam Chair, board members, Ms. LeGrand, Dale Smith, Director of Facilities. Our next move now is the Net Park Transit Center. That's the one we're refurbishing as we speak. We hope to have that open before January 1st. That is our goal. There's a lot that goes into this to make these things safe. They were designed, and we're adding a lot of different designs, features to make them safer. We're upgrading everything as we take the time to put in steel doors. We want to make sure that they're safe, that they're locked. We have personnel up front allowing people to go in and out. We're just adding a very strong level of safety and security for our patrons. So it does take a little bit of time, and we understand that, but we absolutely have to put safety first.
Okay. Any other old business? New business? Okay, at this time, we stand adjourned.